Richard brought another woman to my dinner table and called it business. Her name was Vanessa Lane. She sat beside him like she had already been invited into every room of my life. She smiled at my daughter like she belonged there. Like I was the one making things awkward by still being his wife. Lily was 15, old enough to understand the silence. Too young to know what to do with it. I looked at Richard and asked the only question that made sense. Why is she here? He did not look embarrassed. He did not apologize. He leaned back in his chair, looked at me in front of our child, and said, "Apologize to her, Margaret, or leave the table." For a few seconds, nobody moved. There is a kind of silence that feels empty. This was not that. This silence was full of things Lily should never have had to hear, full of 24 years of marriage being reduced to one cruel sentence. I did not cry. I did not raise my voice. I folded my napkin, placed it beside my plate, and stood up. Then I looked at the man I had loved for more than half my adult life and said, "No, I think I'll make one phone call instead." Richard's face changed. Not enough for anyone else to notice, but I noticed. Not fear yet. Just confusion. That was enough. I walked upstairs, opened the locked drawer beside my bed, and took out the one document Richard had forgotten I could still use. If you have ever seen someone stay quiet and mistaken it for weakness, stay with this story. Because sometimes the quietest person in the room is not broken. Sometimes she is the only one who knows where the proof is. My name is Margaret Ellis. I was 52 years old when my husband told me to apologize to his mistress in my own home. Not his assistant, not his client, not some woman who had accidentally crossed the line. His mistress. And what hurt most was not just that Richard said it. It was the ease of it, the calmness. The way he made it sound like I was the one being unreasonable, like Vanessa was the guest who deserved protection. Like our daughter was supposed to sit there and learn that a woman should swallow disrespect if a man says it with enough confidence. By then, Richard and I had been married 24 years, long enough to know the rhythm of his footsteps in the hallway, long enough to know when his silence meant guilt, long enough to recognize the small smile he used when he wanted to sell me a lie. But we did not start that way. Most marriages do not begin with cruelty. They begin with hope. Richard and I started in a one-bedroom apartment above a dry cleaner on the east side of town. The whole place smelled faintly of steam and starch. The bedroom window rattled every time a truck passed. The heater clicked all night in winter, so loud I used to joke it was paying rent with us. The kitchen was tiny. If Richard opened the refrigerator while I was standing at the stove, one of us had to step sideways. We had one car between us, and even that car felt like it was negotiating with God every time it started. We had student loans. We had medical bills from Richard's shoulder surgery. We had credit card balances we pretended were temporary. And we had a stack of envelopes on the counter that never seemed to shrink, no matter how careful I was with coupons, overtime, and late-night math. Still, I believed in us. Richard had ambition then. Not polished ambition. Not the kind that wears a good suit and talks about growth over lunch. His ambition came home with mud on its boots. He had a used pickup truck, a tool belt, and a phone full of contractors who did not always call back. He wanted to build a construction company. A real one. Trucks, contracts, payroll, insurance. His name on the door. I believed him when he said he could do it. Maybe that was love. Maybe it was loyalty. Maybe, when you were young, you do not always know the difference. I worked part-time as a bookkeeper back then. Payroll, invoices, tax forms, receipts. Nothing glamorous. The kind of work people only notice when it goes wrong. When Lily was born, I cut back my hours. Then I stopped working outside the house completely. That decision followed me for years. People hear stay-at-home mother and think it means a woman left the real world. But I did not leave anything. I stepped deeper into it. I raised our daughter. I packed lunches. I remembered field trip forms, dentist appointments, allergy medication, teacher conferences. Birthday gifts, school shoes, insurance cards, and every tiny piece of life that disappears when a mother stops holding it. I paid the mortgage before Richard remembered it was due. I waited on hold with insurance companies. I found missing receipts in glove compartments and jacket pockets. I kept folders for taxes, contracts, warranties, bank papers, loan documents, and things Richard said we would never need again. He used to praise me for that. In the early years, when his company almost collapsed twice, Richard would come home exhausted, drop into a kitchen chair, and say, "Margaret, you are the reason this business is still alive." I believed him. Back then, maybe he believed it too. Because when the bank wanted clean paperwork for a business line of credit, I was the one sitting across from the loan officer, with everything organized. When a subcontractor damaged a client's property and the insurance company stalled, I was the one pulling policy pages and dated emails. When the tax preparer called about a missing form that could have cost us money we did not have, I was the one who found it. That was our life. Richard built the visible part. I kept the hidden part from falling apart. Then the company grew. At first, slowly. Then quickly enough that people started calling him successful. The trucks got newer. His name appeared on job site signs. The office moved from a rented room in a strip mall to a real building with glass doors and a conference table Richard loved showing off. People saw him. They saw his handshake. They saw his confidence. They saw the man who could talk about expansion like he had always known he would get there. They did not see me at the dining room table at midnight with cold coffee, a calculator, and a laptop that froze if I opened too many spreadsheets. That was fine. I never needed applause. I only needed respect. For a long time, I thought I had it. There was one thing Richard forgot. Years earlier, when the bank approved one of his expansion loans, they wanted protection because our home equity was tied to the business. I co-signed part of the operating agreement. It was not romantic. It was not dramatic. It was just paperwork. But paperwork remembers what people forget. For certain large transfers, asset changes, and company-backed payments tied to marital collateral, my signature still mattered. Richard forgot that. I did not. Men like Richard remember the praise. They remember the ribbon cuttings. They remember the people who shake their hands. They forget the woman who read the fine print. And when a man starts believing the woman who helped hold his life together is just furniture in the room, the warning signs do not usually arrive like thunder. They arrive quietly. First, Richard started coming home late. Not once. Not because of one emergency job. It became a pattern. 6:30 became 8. 8 became 10. Some nights, he walked in smelling like restaurant wine and a perfume I did not own. When I asked, he looked tired in a way that made me feel guilty for asking. "Client dinner," he said. 2 words. That was supposed to end the conversation! Then his phone changed. For 20 years, Richard left his phone anywhere. Kitchen counter, bathroom shelf, between couch cushions. He used to ask me to read his messages while he drove. Suddenly, the phone was always face down. The password changed. Notifications vanished from the lock screen. He started taking calls in the garage, even when it was cold enough to see his breath through the kitchen window. Then Vanessa entered the story. Richard introduced her as an operations consultant. 38 years old, polished, confident, always dressed like she was walking into a room where everyone else was already behind. I asked what her background was. Richard gave me a long answer that sounded impressive until I realized it did not answer the question. Marketing, sales, consulting, brand development, office culture. But construction, finance, actual operations, nothing solid. Still, he hired her. At first, Vanessa was just a name. Then she became part of every conversation. Vanessa found a better vendor. Vanessa understood the software. Vanessa had ideas about branding. Vanessa thought the office needed a more professional culture. Vanessa said this. Vanessa suggested that. Then came the comparisons. Richard did not start by calling me useless. Men like him rarely begin there. They test the ground first. He said Vanessa understood pressure. He said Vanessa knew how business worked now. He said I had been home too long. He said I was out of the loop, as if marriage had a door he had quietly closed behind me. One night, I asked about a hotel charge on the company card. It was from a weekend when Richard told me he was in Columbus visiting a job site. He laughed. Not warmly. It was a small, sharp laugh. "Margaret," he said, "you have to stop making stories out of receipts." I remember that sentence because it sounded reasonable if you did not know him. That is how gaslighting works. It does not always come as screaming. Sometimes it comes with a tired smile and a soft voice, making you feel foolish for noticing what is right in front of you. Another time, I asked about a transfer to a vendor I did not recognize. Richard leaned against the counter and sighed like I was a child. "You don't need to worry about that," he said. "You're not involved in the business anymore." Not involved. That was the first time he said it clearly. As if the business had not lived in my kitchen for years. As if I had not carried its papers and folders and grocery bags and shoe boxes. As if I had not signed the documents that helped keep it alive. As if removing me from his memory removed me from the records. Lily noticed before I wanted her to. She was 15. Old enough to hear tone. Too young to carry adult disappointment. One night, she came downstairs for water and saw Richard texting at the kitchen island at 12:40 in the morning. The next day, she asked him who kept messaging so late. Richard snapped. "Don't start acting like your mother," he said. Suspicious over nothing, Lily went quiet. I watched her face close. That hurt more than what he said to me, because betrayal between adults is ugly enough. But when a child learns that honesty gets punished, something innocent leaves the room. After that, Vanessa became harder to ignore. She came to the office holiday party and stood too close to Richard in every photo. She joined client lunches that had nothing to do with her. She called during dinner, and he answered. She sent messages that made him smile before he remembered I was watching. And with every small act of disrespect, Richard rewrote our marriage. I was no longer his partner. I was emotional, old-fashioned, insecure, suspicious, in the way that was the pattern. He was not just hiding an affair. He was building a story where I deserved to be replaced. I hate admitting this part, but I still wanted another explanation. Even after the late nights, even after the phone, even after the perfume, even after his voice changed whenever Vanessa called. Some part of me still wanted to believe my husband would not be that careless with our life. Then one morning, I opened our joint bank account to pay Lily's insurance premium. I was still in my robe. The coffee beside my laptop had gone cold. The house was quiet, in that ordinary way houses are quiet before they stop feeling safe. There was a transfer I did not recognize. Not huge, not dramatic, just large enough to make my stomach tighten. The recipient was a company account I had never seen before. The memo line had 5 words. "For our new place." I read it once, then again. For our new place. Not materials, not payroll, not equipment, not a client deposit. Our new place. At first, I tried to explain it away for him. Maybe it was a bad label. Maybe it was some internal project code. Maybe Richard would sigh and tell me I misunderstood again. But I did not ask. Not that morning. Instead, I clicked backward. There were more payments. A furniture store. A security deposit. A restaurant near the river where Richard said he was meeting a supplier. A hotel charge from a weekend he claimed he was visiting a job site. Then a medical payment that did not belong to me. And did not belong to Lily. That was when my hands went cold. I did not scream. I did not call Richard. I did not call Vanessa. I printed the statement. Then I saved the PDF to a drive Richard did not know about. Everything I touched was something I had a right to see. Joint account records, shared tax files, company paperwork I had kept because Richard never organized anything unless someone forced him to. I did not hack his phone. I did not break into his email. I did not follow him. I did not need to. Careless men leave paper trails because they think the woman at home has stopped reading. For the next few days, I worked quietly. I checked school pickup records. Richard had missed almost every day. He later claimed he was trying to be more involved with Lily. I checked insurance bills. I checked credit card statements. I checked old company folders from the years when I still handled the books. Then I found the operating agreement. It was in a blue folder with a cracked label, tucked behind tax returns from 8 years earlier. My name was still there. My signature. My authority. For certain large transfers, collateral-backed changes, and business payments tied to marital assets, the bank still required my approval. Richard had built a new life on top of a system he did not understand. He thought I was just a housewife. But on paper, I was still one of the locks on the door. That was the day I stopped asking whether I was imagining things. I started asking what the law would let me prove. Because anger would not protect Lily. Tears would not recover the money. And shouting across the kitchen would only warn Richard to hide better. So I stayed quiet. I cooked dinner. I folded laundry. I smiled politely when Vanessa's name appeared on his phone. And every night, after the house went still, I added one more document to the folder. I had wanted to believe my husband. For a long time, I did. But belief becomes fragile when the numbers start telling the truth. The first time I sat across from Elaine Porter, I did not feel brave. I felt tired. Not the kind of tired a nap can fix. The kind that settles into your bones after years of carrying things nobody sees. Elaine was 59, with silver hair cut just below her chin and eyes that did not waste time pretending. Her office was not warm or soft. No candles. No gentle music. No little signs about healing. Just a dark wooden desk, 2 framed degrees, a stack of legal pads, and a woman who looked like she knew what to do with a mess. I liked that. I did not need someone to comfort me that morning. I needed someone who understood paper. I placed the folder on her desk with both hands. Bank statements, tax returns, company documents, school pickup logs, insurance records, copies of payments I did not recognize. Notes I had written in black ink because black ink felt harder to argue with. Elaine did not open the folder right away. She looked at me first. "Before we talk about what he did," she said, "we need to talk about what you are not going to do." I nodded, even before she finished. "You are not going to call the other woman. You are not going to threaten your husband. You are not going to post anything online. You are not going to follow him. And you are not going to touch his private phone, his private email, or anything you do not have a legal right to access." My throat tightened. Not because I had planned to do those things. Because a wounded part of me wanted the world to know. Elaine tapped the folder once. "If this is going to matter," she said, "it has to stay clean." Clean. That word stayed with me. There was nothing clean about Richard bringing another woman into my life. Nothing clean about Vanessa's name hiding behind company payments. Nothing clean about my husband smiling across the kitchen while a second life was growing behind my back. But Elaine was right. If I let anger drive, Richard would use it against me. He would call me unstable, jealous, bitter, controlling. Men like Richard know how to sound calm while they bury you. So I gave Elaine everything I had. Joint bank statements, old tax returns, business documents I had maintained for years, the operating agreement with my signature still on it, copies of Lily's school emails, medical insurance statements, a calendar I had kept without meaning to, simply because I was the parent who remembered everything. Elaine opened the folder and read, quietly, no gasp, no dramatic hand over her mouth. "Good lawyers do not give you theater. They give you silence, a pen, and the feeling that someone is finally seeing the shape of the thing you survived." Every few minutes, she made a note. Sometimes she circled a date. Sometimes she placed one document beside another and studied them like puzzle pieces. I watched her face more than the papers. Some part of me still wanted her to say I was wrong. That is the strange thing about betrayal. Even when the proof is sitting right there, A part of you still hopes someone can explain it away. After almost an hour, Elaine leaned back. "Margaret," she said, "this is not just an affair. I already knew that." Still, hearing it out loud made my chest tighten. She turned the folder toward me and pointed to 3 separate groups of documents. "Your husband appears to be doing several things at once. Money is moving from marital accounts through a secondary business account. Payments appear connected to an apartment. And based on the school messages and his sudden interest in parenting time, I believe he may be preparing to ask for 50-50 custody." I stared at her. "Richard barely knows Lily's class schedule," I said. Elaine's expression did not change. "I know," she said. "That may be the point. At first, I did not understand. Then I did. Custody was not about Lily. Not to Richard. It was about numbers. It was about reducing support. It was about looking like an involved father on paper after years of letting me do the work in real life." Elaine opened the calendar I had kept. It was not fancy. Just dates, pickups, appointments, dance practice, school emails, late nights, missed dinners, and weekends when Richard said he was working. I had written it because I was tired of being told I imagined things. Now it looked like evidence. "Your records show you are the primary caregiver," Elaine said. "School transportation, medical appointments, extracurriculars, parent communication, almost all of it runs through you." I looked down at Lily's name on the page. 15 years old. Old enough to see betrayal. Still young enough to be used inside it. That was the part that turned something in me cold. A man can betray his wife and tell himself stories. He can say he felt lonely. He can say he felt ignored. He can say another woman made him feel alive again. Men have been dressing selfishness in poetry for a very long time. But using your own child as a financial strategy? That takes a colder kind of heart. Elaine moved to the next document. It was a credit card statement. One charge was circled. A payment to a medical clinic I did not recognize. I had marked it because nobody in our household had gone there. Elaine typed the clinic name into her computer. She read for a moment. Then her face changed. "Not much. Just enough." "What is it?" I asked. She turned the screen toward me. "Prenatal DNA testing." For 1 second, I did not understand. Then I understood too much. The room seemed to shrink. Elaine checked the statement again. The payment had been made with a card connected to one of Richard's business accounts. The appointment confirmation had been printed from the family office printer. I knew because I had found the page in the recycle bin beside the desk. Folded once, as if someone had meant to destroy it and got distracted. The patient name was Vanessa Lane. The billing contact was Richard Ellis. I could hear my own heartbeat. That surprised me. I thought betrayal would sound louder inside the body. It did not. It was quiet. A quiet little death. Elaine placed the prenatal invoice beside the apartment payments. Then she pulled out another sheet. This one was worse. It was a spreadsheet. Plain paper. Black numbers. No perfume. No lipstick. No hotel key. Just math. At the top were 3 words. Child support projection. For one foolish second, I thought it was about Lily. I thought maybe Richard had finally remembered that divorce would not erase fatherhood. Then I saw Vanessa's name in a note near the bottom. Estimated income. Estimated monthly obligation. Estimated payment if paternity was confirmed. He had not been planning for our daughter. He had been planning for hers. Elaine slid a box of tissues toward me. I did not take one. I refused to cry over a spreadsheet. Not there. Not in front of the numbers. So he knew. I said, Elaine's voice softened. He was preparing for the possibility. Preparing. Richard had prepared a budget for another baby while telling me I was too emotional for asking why he came home late. He had prepared an apartment while telling Lily he wanted more time with her. He had prepared to reduce what he owed our child while calculating what he might owe Vanessa's. That was the moment the marriage ended inside me. Not at the dinner table. Not when Vanessa smiled. Not even when Richard told me to apologize. It ended in Elaine Porter's office, with a prenatal DNA invoice on one side of the desk and my daughter's school calendar on the other. Elaine gave me a few minutes. Then she spoke in the steady voice of someone helping a wounded person stand back up. According to your attorney, she said carefully, in this state, the evidence would matter. Financial records can matter. Parenting records can matter. The timing of transfers can matter, but we need to handle this properly. I nodded. My mouth felt dry. What happens now? I asked. Now we file when we are ready, not when he expects it. We request financial disclosure. We ask for preservation of marital assets. We seek custody based on Lily's actual life, not Richard's performance of fatherhood. And if the court allows it, we bring in a forensic accountant. Then she looked at me over the top of her glasses. And until then, Margaret, you go home. That was the hardest instruction she gave me. Not the documents, not the waiting, not the legal fees. Going home, sleeping in the same house as a man who had turned our daughter into a calculation, making coffee in the same kitchen where he lied, listening to him talk about work while I knew there was an apartment somewhere with furniture bought from money that should have belonged to our family. But I did it because Elaine was right. Clean. Everything had to stay clean. So I went home. I cooked dinner. I asked Lily about school. I folded towels. I watched Richard perform ordinary life with the confidence of a man who believed he had already won. One night, he kissed my cheek while reaching past me for his keys. I stood very still until he walked away. There are kinds of pain that make noise. And then there are kinds that sharpen you. For the next few weeks, I became two women. One woman lived in the house Richard still thought he controlled. She made grocery lists, answered school texts, reminded Lily to charge her laptop, and nodded when Richard said he had another late meeting. The other woman worked after midnight. She scanned documents, sorted bank records by date, matched restaurant charges to nights Richard claimed he was out of town, marked every missed pickup, every ignored school email, every medical form he never signed. I sent Elaine clean copies. Nothing stolen, nothing hacked, nothing dramatic, just the truth. Organized well enough that it could no longer be dismissed as suspicion. Richard mistook my silence for surrender. That was his first mistake. He started getting careless. He took calls in the kitchen again. He left receipts in jacket pockets. He mentioned Vanessa's name with less caution, as if I had finally accepted her orbit around our life. He even began talking about custody, not with tenderness, with strategy. One night, while Lily was upstairs, he leaned against the counter and said, "If things ever change between us, I would want equal time." I looked at him across the kitchen. "You barely know her class schedule," I said. His face tightened. "That's not fair." No, it was accurate. Fairness had left our house months before. Maybe years. Then came the dinner. Richard said Vanessa was coming over to discuss a client expansion project. He said it casually, like inviting your mistress into your wife's kitchen was just another item on the calendar. I almost told him no. Instead, I texted Elaine. Her reply came 10 minutes later. "Stay calm. Say little. Do not reveal the file." So I set the table. That is the part people do not understand about women like Margaret Ellis. They think silence means weakness. They do not know what it costs to place forks beside plates for a woman who is sleeping with your husband. Vanessa arrived wearing cream-colored silk and a smile that had already forgiven itself. Lily came downstairs, saw her, and stopped on the last step. Richard noticed. He did not care. Dinner began with business talk. At least, that was what Richard called it. Vanessa laughed too loudly at his jokes. She called him rich once, soft and familiar, then glanced at me to see if I had heard it. I had. Lily pushed food around her plate. Finally, I set down my fork. "Why is she here?" I asked. The room changed. Vanessa's smile faded just enough for me to see the calculation behind it. Richard leaned back in his chair, calm, cold, almost relieved, like he had been waiting for a chance to make me the problem. Margaret, he said, Vanessa has done more for this company in 6 months than you have in years. Lily looked up. I felt that sentence move across the table like a blade. I said nothing. Richard kept going. You have made her uncomfortable. You have been hostile, suspicious, frankly, embarrassing. Vanessa lowered her eyes, performing injury like she had rehearsed it in a mirror. Then Richard looked at our daughter, then back at me. Apologize to her, Margaret, or leave the table. There it was. 24 years of marriage reduced to a command. Apologize to the mistress. In front of my child. In the home I had helped pay for. For a moment, all I heard was the hum of the refrigerator. Then Lily whispered, Dad. Richard ignored her. I folded my napkin, slowly, carefully, because sometimes dignity needs both hands. Then I stood. I looked at Vanessa first. She seemed smaller than she had a minute before. Then I looked at Richard. No, I said. I think I'll make one phone call instead. His expression shifted. Not fear. Not yet. Only confusion. That was enough. I walked upstairs, opened the locked drawer beside my bed, and took out the document Richard had forgotten I could still use. The operating agreement. Beside it was the folder Elaine had helped me build. Bank statements, custody records, apartment payments, the prenatal DNA invoice, the child support projection, every quiet little truth he had left behind because he believed I was too broken to read. I put the folder in my bag. I took my keys. On the way out, Lily stood near the stairs with tears in her eyes. I touched her shoulder. You did nothing wrong, I told her. Then I left the house. Richard called after me, but he did not follow. Men like him only chase when they understand what they are losing. Richard did not understand yet. By morning, Elaine had filed the first motions. A request to preserve marital assets, a demand for financial disclosure, a notice regarding disputed transfers tied to marital collateral, a request that no large business payments be moved without review, a custody filing based on Lily's actual schedule, not Richard's sudden interest in looking devoted. And because my name still appeared where Richard had forgotten it did, the bank received notice that certain transfers connected to the old operating agreement were under dispute. Richard woke up that morning, believing he still controlled the house. He believed he controlled the company. He believed he controlled the story. At 10:07 a.m., his company card was declined at a supplier counter in front of 2 employees. At 10:22, the bank called him. At 10:40, he called me 12 times. I did not answer. I was sitting in Elaine Porter's office, watching the system begin to move. Not fast, not loud, but steady, like a door locking from the inside. The first thing Richard tried to do was move money. That told Elaine almost everything she needed to know. A man with nothing to hide may complain about paperwork. He may get irritated when a lawyer asks for records. But he does not call the bank before breakfast, demanding to know which transfers can still go through. Richard did. Within days, the secondary business account became part of financial discovery. Richard called it operational cash flow. Elaine called it something the court deserved to see. That was the difference between them. Richard believed the right words could soften ugly facts. Elaine believed facts did not need softening. The bank did not freeze his entire company. Real life is rarely that neat. Judges do not wave a hand and make a messy marriage simple. But the bank did start requiring explanations, signatures, and documentation for transfers. Richard had expected to push through quietly. That was enough. Careless people hate questions more than consequences. Questions slow them down. Questions create records. Questions invite other people to look. And Richard had been counting on darkness. Then the forensic accountant came in. His name was Martin Hale, and he had the personality of a locked filing cabinet. He did not care who cried. He did not care who cheated. He did not care whether Vanessa had been valuable to the company. Martin cared about dates, amounts, account names, receipts, invoices, transfers, and whether the story matched the numbers. It did not. The apartment deposit traced back to a company account funded partly with marital money. The furniture purchases lined up with the lease date. The restaurant charges matched nights Richard had told me he was meeting suppliers. The hotel stay matched a weekend he claimed he was visiting a job site. And the prenatal DNA invoice sat in the middle of it all, like a match dropped onto dry grass. Richard tried to explain it away. Of course he did. Men like him do not confess when the first wall cracks. They decorate the crack and hope no one notices the foundation. He said Vanessa was an important employee. He said the apartment had a business purpose. He said I misunderstood the payments. Then he said I was punishing him because our marriage had been unhappy for years. That was interesting. Our marriage had not been unhappy when he needed my signature. It had not been unhappy when I sat beside him at the bank. It had not been unhappy when I found the missing documents that saved his company money. But suddenly, once Vanessa's name appeared in the records, our marriage had been failing all along. Betrayal always wants a new history. Then Richard made his second mistake. He attacked my stability. In his filing, he described me as jealous, emotional, controlling, and unwilling to support his relationship with Lily. Support his relationship. That phrase nearly made Elaine smile. Not because it was funny, because it was foolish. At the temporary custody hearing, Richard arrived in a navy suit with the careful face of a wounded father. He looked tired, but not humble. There is a difference. Vanessa was not there. That did not surprise me. Women like Vanessa enjoy being chosen in private. They enjoy the soft seats, the secret dinners, the stolen weekends. They are less excited when their names show up in legal documents. Richard's attorney spoke first. He said Richard wanted meaningful time with his daughter. He said I had created tension in the home. He said fathers should not be pushed aside because a marriage ended badly. It sounded reasonable if you did not know our life. That frightened me for a moment. Lies do not always look like lies when they wear a good suit. Then Elaine opened Lily's calendar. She did not slam anything on the table. She did not raise her voice. She simply turned the pages. School pickup logs showed my name almost every day. Doctor forms showed my signature. Emails from teachers had gone to me. Dance payments came from my account. Emergency contact updates had been completed by me. When Lily needed new glasses, I took her. When she had a fever before midterms, I called the school. When she cried in the car because Richard forgot another dinner, I sat beside her in the driveway until she could breathe again. Richard's name appeared the way many fathers' names appear when mothers do the work of keeping them included. On paper. In theory, from a distance, Elaine did not call him a bad father. She did not need to. She simply showed the court the difference between wanting custody and actually caring for a child. Richard kept his jaw tight. I could see the muscle moving near his cheek. For the first time in months, he did not look arrogant. He looked like a man trying to figure out what else I had. Then came the money. Richard's attorney tried to keep the business issues separate from custody. He said the company was complicated. He said support should be based only on the income Richard had reported. He said business spending could be misunderstood by someone outside the operation. Elaine let him finish. Then she argued that the financial picture mattered because Richard's support calculations did not match his lifestyle, his spending, or the movement of money through the secondary account. She was careful. Always careful. According to Elaine, in our state, the court could consider that evidence as part of a broader financial review. Could. That was the word she used. Not would. Not guaranteed. Could. Careful words win more than angry ones. The judge allowed further disclosure. That was when Richard's face changed. Not when the affair came up. Not when the apartment came up. Not even when the bank records came up. His face changed when the judge said disclosure. Because betrayal can survive in shadow. Money cannot. The child support projection came later, during a closed conference with the attorneys. Elaine placed it on the table, without drama. No speech, no performance, just paper. Richard looked at it and went pale. It was one thing to cheat. It was another thing to calculate support for another baby while asking to reduce support for the daughter sitting in the hallway with headphones on, pretending not to be scared. The prenatal DNA invoice confirmed what the spreadsheet suggested. Richard had been preparing for Vanessa's child while preparing to fight me over Lily. Not because he wanted more bedtime talks. Not because he wanted to pack lunches.
Not because he suddenly cared about school pickup, dentist appointments, or helping with homework. Because numbers look better when custody is split. That was the ugliest truth in the case. He had taken fatherhood and turned it into a discount. The judge did not make final rulings that day. Courts move carefully. They should. But the temporary orders came down hard enough for Richard to feel them. Large transfers had to be documented. The secondary account had to be disclosed. The apartment payments and related expenses were flagged for review in property division. Lily's schedule stayed primarily with me while the custody evaluation moved forward. Child support would be calculated using a fuller picture of Richard's income, not the smaller version he tried to present. And the business spending connected to Vanessa was no longer a private embarrassment. It was part of the case. That was the beginning of Richard's collapse. Not the movie kind. No screaming in the rain. No one dramatic scene where everything fell apart. It was practical. Letters from attorneys, calls from banks, revised statements, uncomfortable meetings, employees noticing Vanessa had stopped coming to the office, vendors asking why old invoices were being pulled, lenders asking questions Richard did not want to answer. He had spent months building a second life. Now he had to explain the receipts for it. Vanessa did what people like Vanessa often do when the fantasy turns into paperwork. She stepped back. First, she needed space. That was how Richard phrased it, as if space were temporary. Then she stopped coming to the office. Then her attorney sent a letter saying she would cooperate only through proper legal channels. Proper legal channels. There was a cold beauty in that sentence. Richard thought Vanessa was his escape. She became another file. And that is the thing about affairs built on ego. They can survive hotel rooms. They can survive secret dinners. They can survive lies whispered into phones after midnight. But they often cannot survive subpoenas, account statements, and the question of who paid for what. At home, Lily barely spoke to him. That hurt Richard more than the bank. I saw it once in the courthouse hallway. He tried to approach her with that soft father voice he used when he wanted forgiveness without confession. Lil, he said. She looked at him. Not with hate, with disappointment. That is worse. You told Mom to apologize to her, Lily said. Richard opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Because what could he say? That he was angry? That he was confused? That he did not mean for his daughter to remember the exact moment he chose another woman at her mother's table. Children remember the moments adults hope will blur. They remember the sentence. They remember the chair. They remember who made them feel unsafe. Lily did not yell. She just walked past him and sat beside me. That was when Richard finally understood that not every loss shows up on a financial statement. The final divorce negotiations were not clean, but they were clear. Richard had to amend his financial disclosures. The hidden account came into the marital estate review. Part of the money spent on Vanessa was considered in the settlement discussions. His request for equal custody weakened under the weight of Lily's actual life. Support was calculated on a fuller picture of his earnings. I kept primary custody. I kept enough of the home equity to buy a smaller place. I kept my retirement. Most important, I kept my daughter's trust. Richard kept his company, technically, but not the version he liked to brag about. His name was still on the trucks, but names do not shine the same once people know what was hiding underneath them. Karma did not arrive wearing a robe. It arrived in spreadsheets. It arrived in disclosure requests. It arrived in a company card declined at the wrong counter. It arrived in the quiet look of a daughter who finally understood which parent had been telling the truth. Richard once believed he could humiliate me in my own home and still control what happened next. He never understood the rules. He thought power was the loudest voice at the dinner table. But sometimes power is the woman who says nothing, keeps the receipts, protects her child, and lets the paper trail speak when everyone else finally has to listen. The divorce did not make me bitter. That surprised some people. They expected me to become hard. They expected me to speak Richard's name like poison. They expected me to spend the rest of my life measuring every room by what he had taken from it. But I had already given that marriage enough years. I refused to give it the rest of my peace. 2 months after the final order,
Lily and I moved into a small townhouse on the quiet side of town. It did not have the big kitchen Richard used to brag about. It did not have a 3-car garage. It did not have polished floors for women like Vanessa to walk across like they owned the place. But it was clean. It was calm. And every key on the ring belonged to me. Lily chose the upstairs bedroom, with the window facing the maple tree. She put books on the shelf, taped photos beside her mirror, and slept through the night for the first time in months. That mattered more than square footage. The custody schedule went on the refrigerator in blue ink. Bills came in my name. Groceries were bought without arguments. Dinner was quiet, but not the old kind of quiet. Not the kind where a child watches every adult breath and waits for something to break. This quiet was safe. I started taking bookkeeping clients again from a desk near the living room window. At first, it was only 2 old contacts from Richard's early business days. Then a divorced woman who needed help understanding her settlement. Then a small bakery owner. Then a contractor's widow trying to organize tax records before selling the company her husband had left behind. Word traveled slowly. Honest things usually do. I did not become rich overnight. Real life does not reward dignity that quickly. But I paid my bills. I rebuilt my name. And I remembered that I was good at something Richard had spent years pretending was small. 6 months later, Richard called. Vanessa was gone by then. The apartment was empty. The company had been downsized. His voice sounded older, flatter, stripped of that smooth confidence he used to wear like a tailored suit. He said he was sorry. He said he had made mistakes. He said he had been selfish. He said maybe we could meet somewhere and talk like adults. I listened until he finished. Not because I owed him that. Because I wanted to hear whether his apology was for what he had done, or for what it had cost him. There is a difference. When he stopped talking, I took a breath. Then I said, I became one the night you told me to apologize to her. There was nothing cruel in my voice. That was what made it final. I did not hang up because I hated him. I hung up because I no longer needed him to understand. That is a strange kind of freedom. Not loud, not exciting, just quiet. The person who broke your heart no longer gets to explain your worth to you. Redemption is not always the betrayer crawling back. Sometimes redemption is a woman making coffee in her own kitchen while her daughter sleeps safely upstairs, realizing no apology is strong enough to pull her back into a life that nearly erased her. I did not win because I destroyed Richard. I won because I protected my child. I kept my dignity. I used the truth. And I walked away before bitterness could become my new home. If this story reminded you that silence can be the first step toward freedom, subscribe for more stories about betrayal. Divorce, custody battles, hidden evidence, and the quiet moments when people finally take their power back. Sometimes the proof does not just end a marriage. Sometimes it gives a woman back the life she forgot she was allowed to have.